Hi, my name is Jamie Woods. I'll be your instructor for EC 314 Public and Private Investment Analysis for the fall of 2015. Since this is a hybrid class, we don't have quite as much time in the classroom as a regular in-person class. So I like to take that period of time that usually is there to walk through the syllabus, put it into a video so you can watch it ahead of time, and then just plain ask questions instead of wasting classroom time on it. So let's go ahead and get started. First, what you see highlighted here is the official description that you have of the course. This is the one in the bulletin. It kind of applies to everyone. But really what's going on is the second sentence right down here. Roughly 80% of the students in the class are engineers. I just wanted to make sure that they can pass their PE and FE classes. This class also happens to be one which is required by law for just about all the engineering majors, except for, I think, computer engineering is there. The other part is to prepare the economists to work with engineers. I come from a consulting background. I've been in it for about 20 years, usually as a sideline to the professorial stuff. And I put together a list of skills that we need in order to work together, some common languages, because there's a lot of these tasks in this class that get passed between engineers, economists, and MBA types, depending upon budget and rate. So basically, it's there to make sure that if out in the world we get to work together, I won't want to strangle you or anything along those lines. Just making sure that you can do the parts you have to do. And then finally, we have this little bit right here where this is a hybrid class. This means it's half the amount of time that we usually have in the classroom, but don't worry, there is a bunch of online material. There is a huge wiki that has more than 200 pages in it. There are approximately 200 relatively short YouTube videos that supplement all the material that we have. And so it's good coverage for those times in class where I'm normally just projecting lecture out to you. The kind of things where we're not going back and forth, and we're able to spend more time in the classroom going back and forth on problems rather than the projecting information out to you. Let's move on to the prerequisites. Officially, they're none. However, you should have a reasonable math background. Math 95, basically, I'm just looking for high school algebra is what we're doing. I've found over the years that the students that have problems in the class are usually those that are a little weak on math concepts. And this typically has to do with things like how to handle exponents, order of operation, and that kind of stuff. And I will, on the first day of class, hand out what used to be the Math 95 placement test that we used to have here at PSU. The idea is if you could do about half the questions on the placement test, you'll be fine in the class. You know enough in order to get through it because it really is just high school algebra. If you can remember doing about half the problems, but you couldn't quite pull it off at the time, that's fine too. It just means you can roll back, relearn some of the stuff, review it, and you should be A-okay too. It's just the math trips up a couple of students. Admittedly, for 80% of the class, this is not going to be an issue at all. When I give you this, I won't ever look at it again. I'll take it, put it up on the shelf, but it will come out if you come to me after the drop date and it turns out your problem really is things like order of operation, not being able to handle exponents. And I just wanted to give you proper warning that this is going to be a requirement in there. Some students have also suggested that a course in accounting would be helpful, but the accounting part of the class, we hit introductory topics at the same rate as you would in an intro accounting course. So though it may seem fairly intensive while you're in there, really you're hitting at the same rate as you would an intro course, but with topics focused on what I need you to be able to do later on in the class and what I need you to be able to do later on when you're on the job. So let's get around to then how to contact, communication protocols. The big message that we have here is that I have two very large hybrid sections of these, or at least large by PSU standards. They're about 100 students each. And sending email, though everyone has now figured out how to do this, is extremely efficient. What I find is that if one student asks me a question via email, I typically get quite a few of them. And so what I've done is I've set up a forum system right here. The forum system is right here. It's called Piazza. And the idea is to post questions, as long as they're not very personal, up in the forum so that I can answer them all at once. And this way it cuts down on the email, makes it so that I can kind of quickly get to you. I answer forum questions a couple of times a day. Other students will answer them too. And oftentimes I find out that students give better answers than I do for the students I couldn't reach with either the videos or the lectures or other explanations I have. Sometimes it just takes a different person explaining it for it to work out to you. So keep in mind, whenever you've got a question, aim for the forums first, and your feedback will, oddly enough, be faster than emailing me. I've also set up the forums not in D2L and on this other service because I wanted something that was independent of PSU login and D2L itself. Students and I have had too many experiences with what I call D2L apocalypses, where we couldn't communicate with each other. Piazza is independent. Piazza also has an advantage over the D2L forums in that it has a really nice markup language for math there. We'll have quite a bit of math in the course, and it just uses LaTeX markup. So you can type in things like slash, frac, open bracket, and so on down the line, which will turn into fractions, which looks nice to everyone else. The idea then is, remember to go to forums. There'll be a TA for the course. I don't know exactly who the TAA is going to be, but their contact information will eventually be here. They also will hold some regular office hours in Kramer Hall 230, which is on the second floor right by the elevator. My office will be in Kramer Hall 2410, which is up in the Econ Suite. Just go ahead and hang a right, and I'll be on the left-hand side. I should be on campus 5 days a week, sometimes 6. It's just that sometimes you'll see a little note on my door that says working, do not knock, or something along those lines. Now, if you really want to get in contact with me about questions and such, I suggest that you use the IM function that you have in your Gmail account that goes along with the school. I answer that almost all the time. And if you're not comfortable with IM, text messaging works for me too, as well as phone. We're in the 21st century. We don't have to do everything in person. And oftentimes I find out that IMing and text messaging can be a little bit easier than, kind of long emails. Commonly what happens when students have a question, they ask a question they think is fairly straightforward, but it turns out that I need to have some diagnostic questions too to find out how you're understanding it, how you're thinking about it. So you don't end up asking me a question like, do you still beat your wife? Yes or no? It's like, well, I can answer the logically correct answer, but you'll get weird implications from it. So please go ahead and feel very free to IM me or text me, and I will answer within some reasonable amount of time. Please note that I will rarely respond after 6 p.m. and also on the weekends. Part of the 6 p.m. thing is I tend to go to bed pretty early because I get up pretty early. And so I like to keep my last part of the evening relatively free. And also the weekends because, well, I like to go out and do outdoorsy things. I did have a student last year who seemed to have an unerring ability to detect while I was on the trail someplace in the gorge just coming out of signal. So please keep in mind there will be some limitations there too. I'll have some regularly scheduled office hours. They'll be on Monday, 10:30 to 12. That goes through the last week of class, but does not include finals week. These are drop-in hours. You don't have to tell me you're coming or make an appointment or anything like that. You just show up to those things. Because this is a hybrid course, I also make it so that you don't have to show up to go to the office hours. So during office hours, I'll have a webcam up. There will be a link on D2L, and you can just kind of show up, say hi, ask your question wherever you may be. So it probably can save some of you some trips to campus, or at least trips across campus to ask your particular questions. And this just uses the Hangout functionality that we have in our campus Gmail accounts. I realize that the regular office hours are kind of limited, but it's kind of a joke at PSU about office hours that if you want to get yourself a good hour of time where students are never going to show up, you simply declare them office hours and announce them regularly, and no one will show up. is kind of a joke, but it is kind of true. Students don't show up to regular scheduled office hours very frequently. So I have also set up an appointment system. There's a link here which gets you to a appointment setting system. I've set up about 15-minute slots. There should be a slew of them available each week. So if you need to see me or speak to me outside those times of the office hours, just go ahead and set up an appointment and I'll be there for you. You'll have choices on whether it's going to be a phone meeting, hangout meeting, or an in-person meeting. Just tell me how you want to meet and give me a general idea about the topic. So I can do a little bit of research ahead of time to find out what's going on. So if you're having problems with, say, internal rate of return, I can go back and take a look at your quizzes before your appointment and get an idea about what your problems are. Please note that if you make an appointment and then fail to show up without canceling, I'll knock down your grade just a little bit. This was put in a while back because some students were abusing the appointment function, setting a bunch of appointments and just not showing up for it. I believe the record was a gentleman who made 8 appointments and then didn't show up for them. Textbooks. This one will be kind of important to you because it's got a dollar value associated with it. It is my point of view that all the textbooks in this particular area are just about the same, so it really doesn't matter which one you get. Basically, if you find a textbook that has the word engineering economics in the title, it should be A-OK. Because I needed to assign a textbook for those people that have someone who pays for their textbooks and it has to be a required book, I put the 4th edition in there, even though there's 3rds out there, 5ths, and even 6ths are being out there too. So the idea is that you should be able to grab just about any textbook that you want, provided engineering economics is in there. See how it matches up with the table of contents in this 4th edition book, which I've created a copy of the table of contents here. And if it matches up reasonably well, you should be A-OK. I will admit that plenty of the texts that say engineering economics don't have this little chunk of accounting that we do in the front in order to make this a university studies course. But we've got a fairly comprehensive wiki which should help you out on those things. So again, just about any book that has engineering economics in the front cover will work for you, but it's up to you to make the correspondence between the contemporary engineering economics 4th edition and whatever text that you get. Most students can cut their textbook costs down to about $20, and oftentimes students can get books for free if they wish. They can just bump over the library, and there's a whole little shelf down there that has engineering economics textbooks. The library is good with buying them as long as they're not actually assigned for the course. There is a secondary text that I do suggest to students who are having problems with the time value of money and other kinds of calculations, and that's the Shams Outline of Engineering Economics. They're the typical Shams series that you can pick up for about 10 or 12 bucks. It's really great with some of the worked examples there, and if you do have some trouble, great book to have. I have about 3 of them, I think, in my office, and if you want to borrow it, that's fine. I'll just hand them out to you, take your name, and if you don't return it in a timely manner, I will torment you via email and other ways until it does get returned. So that's it about the textbooks. In summary, get something that says engineering economics. You should be able to keep the cash outlay under about 20, 25 bucks and make the correspondences with what's in here, and you should be A-OK. Now, this is clearly an online course, so there's going to be plenty of other resources besides the text. D2L is one that we're clearly going to use. And in fact, it'll be the way that we'll make the assignments. The quizzes will go through there. You'll be able to see your grades and so online. There is a giant course wiki, and also there's Piazza, which we've already discussed. There will be a separate video about these tools, but I'll hit some of the basics right now. D2L is what we use for the quizzes. It's where you'll see your grades and all that other fun stuff. You are the person who's required to know how to use this. So I'm not necessarily going to give you any kind of training on it, but when you log into D2L, there's usually some kind of class there that teaches you how to use D2L if it's a problem. Once you get to the page for the class, you will see up in the center a nice little box that has a link to the wiki. I suggest once you get to the wiki, you bookmark it so you don't have to go through D2L. The link I told you about to schedule appointments will also be there. And so you'll be able to click that, open up to another page, schedule an appointment. The Hangout link that I'll use during office hours, so you can attend office hours from a distance, will also be there. And you'll find a box there with deadlines on all the quizzes that we're going to have in class. The deadlines are all hard. You know about the deadlines at least a week ahead of time. So there should be no excuse to miss them once you see them. And then finally, there'll be the link to the 4th edition of the book. So if you have a book other than the 4th edition, you'll be able to make correspondences with the topics, because the way I give you your reading is going to be things like read chapter 4.1 through 4.3 and so on down the line. Now, within D2L, your course material is laid out for you. So if you go to the upper left-hand corner, it'll have something which says course content. The class is broken up into modules. The modules don't always correspond to a week. Sometimes the modules will be done in half a week. We'll do 2 in a week. Sometimes a module will extend over 2 weeks, so don't quite think of them as 1 week each. But they'll be over some fairly large topics. Within the module, you'll see some things that are about preparation. It'll have one link will give you the pages out of the book, and also links to the parts of the wiki that you should be reading. The wiki has text. The wiki also has videos. And the idea is you should listen to all those videos. You should be taking notes on those videos. You should be organizing that stuff so that you know that you've learned it. Please keep in mind that for a hybrid course, if you think about the normal amount of time you take on a course, so you've got usually 4 hours a week in the classroom, you're going to have to put in an extra 2 hours on the wiki just to kind of make up for that. And then I'm kind of old school, so I kind of expect 3 hours for every hour in the course still. And this is your ability to learn the material so you're actually effective with it. So please don't think that half the amount of time in the classroom means half the effort outside the classroom. It just means that you have more than you normally would have outside the classroom. So I expect a lot of effort out of you. There are some quizzes which are practice assignments in there. These are set up to take as many times as you wish. Each one of the questions will have a link to a wiki page that's associated with them. Right now, almost all those pages just have the question on there. I'm using the longer explanations for the practice assignments as a way of generating extra credit. And there'll be more details on this in section 5.4. Oops, didn't mean to do that. On section 5.4 of the, there we go, of the syllabus. You'll also find 2 kinds of quizzes in there. There'll be some quizzes that are labeled pre, and there's some quizzes that are labeled post. The intent is that you'll do the pre-quizzes either before we have a class section on it or soon after we have a class section on it. And then sometime later, the post assignment will come due. The pre-assignments actually count towards your grade. You can take them up to 2 times. You don't have to take them 2 times, but I'll give you the highest score of the 2. The questions are somewhat randomized, so there'll be parameter differences. The orders of the questions will be different, and even the questions themselves will be different from time to time. So you won't get quite the identical quiz each time, but the subject matter and difficulty will be approximately the same, and you'll get the highest score on each. So please watch out for those caveats about things moving, things changing from attempt to attempt. So simply writing down that the answer to question 1 was A the first time around won't necessarily help you if you're taking it at a second time. Also, do yourself a favor when you do take these quizzes the second time. Put some time in between taking them. Just simply glancing at, oh, that's what I got wrong, and then moving on from there usually isn't effective for getting a good grade. Now, the other quizzes you have are going to be labeled as post quizzes. Post quizzes count the same as 2 pre-quizzes. These will, you're only allowed to take them once. Post quizzes are usually have more open response style questions, the kind of thing that you'll have in the final exam that we'll have later. We have to grade these by hand, so you won't get immediately feedback on what you got right, but they'll help prepare you for what you'll see on the final exam. And in fact, some of the questions, or at least the style of them, will be distinctly repeated in the final exam. These quizzes, both the pre and the post, are timed. You have 120 minutes to do them. That's 2 hours. And they're usually dialed in so that the average student can finish them in about 45 minutes. So please keep that in mind. If you hit the 120-minute barrier, D2L will automatically submit your quiz for you. Excuse me, I seem to have some dogs howling. And also, this is D2L, so if you submit a quiz without putting answers, a 0 goes in there. So make sure that you have the time to start the quizzes when you do them. Also, if you think about quizzes as being kind of a testing environment, do yourself a favor and pick the right time for you to take the test. Pick an ideal time. Set up your test-taking environment so that it is mostly distraction-free, whatever it takes in order to be in a good test-taking mode. Try not to do it at the very last minute. That usually doesn't mean that you're in a good test-taking mode. Also, things that are there is that I will post the deadlines way ahead of time. They'll be on the calendar tool. They're hard. If you can't plan within the next week to do them, that's going to be your problem. It's not necessarily mine. Having a disruption in D2L in the hour or two before they're due does not change the deadline at all. You are allowed to take quizzes sometime other than the final 2 hours before they're due. You can do them anytime you want, as long as you're there before the deadline. All right, let's see. What else do we have here? Let's go on to the wiki, which is the other source of material that's there. The wiki is actually quite extensive. There is a link to it right here. It's on Wikidot, which is, how should I put it? It's kind of an old school wiki. Regular markup language, no, what you see is what you get. Moment. But you need to sign up for Wikidot to get an account name, then go to the wiki for the course, ask for permission to get into the wiki, and I'll let everyone in every single morning. Part of the reason why I require you to be a member nowadays is I want to encourage students to actually edit the wiki. Wikis are meant to be edited by everybody, not just me. And so if you see a small thing you can fix it. I'll review some of the fixes there. Also, adding to the wiki, creating longer answers to those practice quizzes is how we will be handling extra credit in the course. So please keep in mind that getting access to the wiki is at least a 24-hour process, but it runs smoothly as long as everyone gets on board right away. Wikidot is, I have to remind you, a resource outside of PSU. So I don't have any other pull than you do. So please go ahead and read the documentation if you're having problems. A note on Netiquette, which is just etiquette. It's kind of a long explanation of what we have right here. And it basically says, be nice to each other. Don't be rude. If you are rude, I'll come at you in the same media that's there. So if you're rude on the forums, if you're rude on the comments in the wiki, I'll come after you in the same way. And if you continue, I'll basically cut off your access to those things, which can have a profoundly negative effect on your grade. I have never had a problem with this on the forum, so everything should generally be a-okay. Attendance, online participation. Do me a favor, if you show up to class, make sure that you've read something. Review your notes and so on down the line. A lot of times in the course, you'll have a quiz before we actually have a lecture. This may be different for some of you. There is a tendency in engineering and sciences to have the introduction of topics in classes, and then you do things afterwards. If you go over to the humanities, you're expected to have read things ahead of time and then enter into the classes. Social sciences tend to go both ways interchangeably, so it really does depend. So please do a little bit of work ahead of time. Also, showing up to class is the way that you'll be able to get access to these things, which is called essential questions, which I'll explain later. It puts a limitation on your grade not being able to pass these things. Um, let's also talk a little bit about kids coming to class. It is a-okay. It's just fine. Some of my favorite students have ended up being small children. They're frequently very attentive. I've only been distracted a couple of times. One was someone brought a little bitty baby that was about 3 months old, extremely cute. I was distracted the entire time. And there has to date been only one screaming demon child. So please, if it's a problem with daycare falling away, suddenly the schools have a day off that didn't know about, everything should be fine. So go ahead and bring them. Don't make them a barrier. Also, online participation is not optional. That's how we're doing our homework. So stick with it. You'll be fine. Now let's talk a bit about grades. Most of your grade will be determined by online assignments in D2L, 80%. There's also an in-person final exam, which is absolutely mandatory, which is the other 20%. Grades will generally be based upon your rank in the class. So I'll do the weighted average of the scores, but it is limited by your in-class assessment of these things I call essential skills, which are basically 4 things that I really need you to know when you get out in the world. And I'll have a little bit of details on that later. Generally speaking, in the class, I end up with about 30% A's, 30% B's, and the rest are other things. I can't necessarily guarantee that in this course because I'm adding in a final exam for the first time, and so we'll see how that works out. When I assign grades, I typically will look at the full distribution and look for big gaps in the grade distribution and draw lines between the gaps for an A and a B and so on down the line. The grading by rank in class means that you're never something like a single point away from an A or anything like that. I hate that system. It only works well if you have good history on the questions, the probability of each student getting them right, the kind of thing you can do with an SAT, but otherwise I don't think it makes very much sense. Anyway, let's go to the online quizzes. As I said before, there are 2 types of quizzes that we have here. There are the pre-quizzes and the post-quizzes. Each quiz counts the same amount, or at least each pre-quiz does. So you may have a pre-quiz with, say, 20 points in it and another one that has 3 points in it, but as far as your grade goes, they're worth the same. In other words, you can't add the pre-quiz points together in order to get what your score is. You have to deal with the fraction that you got correct in each quiz. So if you had something where you got 3 out of 4 on one pre-quiz and 15 out of 20 on one pre-quiz, you got the same score on each one. Post quizzes are worth twice as much as a pre. So basically, if you want to know what your quiz score is, you add up all your pre-quizzes and you add up twice the sum of your post quizzes. With this little thing that I do in order to make it so you can have bad days and technical difficulties, I drop either the lowest 2 pre-quiz scores or the lowest post-quiz score, whichever gives you the best score. This is because things happen. You have a brain fart, you forget that you have a quiz due. You had technical difficulty in the time that you actually wanted to do the quizzes. You were sick. I just take care of it. And so I'll make these kinds of adjustments at the end of the term. You don't have to tell me anything about it. You don't have to tell me why. It has the added advantage that I don't have to make value judgments on what happens to you. It just automatically gets taken care of. The other part of the grade buildup is the final exam right here. This is a new element in the course. I had removed final exam several years ago, but I've found that I needed to add it back in. Basically, what this is here for is to provide me with additional assurance that whatever was done online was done by the person enrolled in the class. So on final exam day, you show up with a picture ID and take the written final exam. It's 20% of your grade. Not taking the final exam is not an option. It is required. If you don't take the final exam, you get a failing grade in the class. It is an absolute requirement. The final exam will consist of written questions, more in line with what you see in the post quizzes. covering the same material, and they'll tend to be more problem solving than definitional. So it won't be what I refer to as memory intensive. It will be problem solving intensive that's there. I'll have sheets of some accounting ratios and formulas for time value money there. And in fact, there'll be a link in D2L so you can see exactly what I'll be giving you as far as those supplementary materials. When you show up to the final exam, you can bring a calculator and writing implement, but I'm going to ask no phones, or at least they should be off. Smart watches should be popped off in your pocket. You won't be allowed to use books or computers in order to do this. So you're going to be really old school with a calculator and a pencil on this. I'm sorry about the restrictions, but I've had circumstances with students texting each other answers across the classroom, or how should I put it, having an outside expert there on their phone to deal with some of the questions. So I'd rather make sure that I'm actually testing you and not somebody else, or your ability to round together some folks to help you out on an exam. So that's the buildup of the grades. But now we have these things which I refer to as essential questions, which are necessary but not sufficient conditions for passing. I've decided that there are 4 things that are really important in the class that I want to make sure that you know. The first is that you have kind of a grasp of some accounting principles that's there. Not a whole lot, just a couple of chunks. And I've developed these little quizzes, which you'll be able to take one every single class period to prove that you have a certain minimum amount of knowledge. And basically, I'll give you a rough transaction, like, you buy a car or something like that. You tell me what happens on the balance sheet, the income statement, the cash flow statement, the general results that are there. Another essential thing that I think you should know has to do with the representation of cash flows in some ways called factor notation. And so I'll have one of these ready for you every single class period after they get introduced to the course, to allow you to express cash flows in a very compact way that's functional, so people can actually see what's going on. It's something that you do quite frequently out in the world. And in fact, the outside world may make more sophisticated use of these time value money formulas than we do inside the classroom. I just want to be able to do them in a reasonable way. The third one is the ability to use choice criteria, the common ones: present worth, annual worth, and internal rate of return, in order to make investment choices. So it'll give you, a list of assets, and you have to say, well, which one's best under these circumstances, and so on down the line. And then finally, create some relatively simple cash flow projections on an income and cash flow statements. This brings in a lot of the accounting material. It brings in some of the time value of money. It brings in information about depreciation and taxes, a kind of a summative test of all the information that you've had in the course. And again, this gets brought into the classroom every single week. There'll be a brand new one once we introduce it to class. Now, the way it provides is a limitation, is that if your quiz scores are high enough to warrant an A, you need to pass all 4 of them to get an A. If you pass 3 of the 4 of them, it is a necessary but not sufficient condition for a B. So you could have quiz scores that would warrant an A, but if you only pass 3 of the 4, you get a B in the class. And in order to get a grade of C- or higher, you have to pass 2 of the 4 in order to get there. In other words, I don't want to give you a passing grade unless you can demonstrate some kind of minimal proficiency in 2 of these 4. Okay, so again, these are supposed to be necessary but not sufficient. You can pass all 4 of them, but if you do really bad on the quizzes in the final exam, you don't get an A just because you passed all 4. Now, I will give you a couple of different ways of satisfying these requirements, because they are, how should I put it, they can really mess with your grade if you aren't on top of them. We will do them in class. You'll have opportunities to do this orally by just making an appointment. And also, I will have some available during the final exam period in addition to your final exam. So they're not part of it. You kind of do it on top of it. So as far as doing these in class, I will reserve the last 10 or 15 minutes of the class for these essential questions. So I'll start in the second week by bringing essential question 1. That's the accounting one. And I'll keep bringing them all throughout the term, a new one every single week. And after we hit time value of money, I'll start bringing a new one of those every single week. And I'll just hand them out. You're allowed to try one of each type every single week, so you can't grab 2 of them because otherwise it's like a Hail Mary pass. And you grade them, turn them in, we'll grade them, and you'll find out quite quickly whether you passed or not. We'll have that noted on D2L. You'll find plenty of examples. So all the past examples we've given over the last couple of years are up in the wiki in a folder. There's also some videos explaining the answers and why the answers are that way up there too. There's usually about 40 or so of those. So there's a lot of worked examples on these. I apologize ahead of time for not being able to hand them out to you in class. Basically, you can go to the Econ office, Kramer Hall 241, and ask for the office people to give you your essential questions back. Just putting them in a folder at either the front or the back of the room turned out to be not FERPA compliant, which is about educational privacy rights. And so we're doing it this way until I can figure out something along the lines of scanning them and emailing to you or something along those lines. Now, the other way that you can pass these is by scheduling a 15-minute appointment through the appointment link that I already told you about in D2L. Please be careful about putting these off to the last minute. You can probably guess that as we get near the end of term, the appointment slots start to get rarer and rarer and rarer as students try to pass these essential questions. And usually there are no free slots available during the last 2 weeks of class, just because they're taken up by other students. So if you don't see a slot, it means that there actually aren't any slots. They've already been taken. Don't ask for a different kind of one there. I will give you a equivalent oral exam. It'll probably be a little bit different from what you see on the written forms. Oftentimes I minimize some calculations because we're in there. It'll be done on the whiteboard or a scrap of paper. One of the advantages of doing it orally is that while you're standing right there, I ask you to kind of speak what it is that you're thinking about, and so I can get into your thought processes to see what's going on. Students typically do better the second time after they've had an oral exam on either the written version or other, just because I can say, oh, here's what you're doing wrong. It's this easy thing. You just keep doing the same thing wrong over and over and over again. I can fix that for you. So it does work out rather well. When you do show up for one of these, please make sure to bring your ID so I can verify who you are. Part of the function of the essential questions is to make sure that the person doing the online work is the same person who's doing the in-person work. Now, the last opportunity to take these is as an addendum to the final exam. So this means it goes on top of them. You don't have to take it at the final exam if you don't want to. We'll allow you at least, to make 2 attempts. You could make it so that your 2 attempts are both essential question 3 choice, or you can get 1 accounting and 1 time value of money. It doesn't matter what you do, but it will be in addition to the regular final exam period. So it can make kind of a rushed final exam. This last chance, along with the final exam, is intended to be exactly that, a last chance. It is not your main chance. So please don't depend upon this for your grade. Get these essential questions done either in the classroom or by oral exam. Don't put it off to the last minute. Now let's talk a little bit about extra credit. I haven't had extra credit in the class for a while. I will make extra credit available that's equivalent to 2 pre-quizzes. And here's the way it works. For every one of the pre-quizzes that you see, for every one of the practice quizzes that you see, each one of them will have a link given in the feedback to a part of the wiki. And right now it's set up so just the question is there. Extra credit is gained by claiming one of these questions. So this is the part where you email me your name, the link to the page you want to edit, the wiki.username, and it's got to be at a time that's proximate to the pre-quiz, either a week before or a week after is what we're aiming for. And what you do is then edit that page, putting together a good, well-constructed, reasoned, and explained answer within about the same time frame. And then ask your fellow students, probably during Piazza, through Piazza, to look at the question, and you can upvote it or downvote it or discuss what's going on and generally improve it one way or another. And I'll check in on a daily basis on the pages that have been upvoted and downvoted. And if I'm looking one of those days within a week or within 2 weeks of the email, and I see that you are upvoted by at least +5, then I will go ahead and take a look at it. And if it hits some kind of minimal standards for an explanation, I'll go ahead and give you the extra credit. Now, please note that sometimes other people can come in and really seriously improve it if you gave a very poor answer, and I may in fact just give the extra credit to somebody else. So just claiming it and sitting on it doesn't necessarily make it so that you get extra credit. Sometimes someone else can very well just hugely improve the answer to make it so it's actually correct, give explanations on why the wrong answers aren't wrong and those kinds of things, and make it so it really is a good answer. Again, I'm testing out this extra credit system, and this is the one we'll be using. You can do this on up to 2 questions. The key thing is that you can't kind of wait for the last minute, because the extra credit must be done at a time when it is useful to other students. That's why it's keyed for within 2 weeks of the pre, so students can look at the well-written answer to the pre-quiz before they take their post-quiz. So that's the extra credit mechanism. And again, on any of this about grading or extra credit or books, you have any kind of questions, please go ahead and ask them up in Piazza. There are a couple other rules in the class. First one is begging for grades. Please don't do it. If you need to get a B in the class, you should in fact work harder, come to office hours, do extra questions, something along those lines. Don't try to make me feel guilty. It doesn't work anymore. I've been lied to too many times. When you're doing your online quizzes, your world is open to you. You're able to use your book, wiki, calculator, spreadsheets, notes, other resources, as long as you're not using another person or another student. So don't ask for the answer on a forum. Don't ask another student. Don't go with your tutor to try to get these things. It's intended to be you with non-interactive resources. When you're doing the essential skills tests in the classroom, as well as when you're doing them during the final exam and also in person, you basically have your calculator available to you. That's it. It's done without notes, wiki, book, or anything else. So you got to have that stuff kind of packed up in your head in order to do it. Please keep these in mind, these limitations on which I have available to you. The final exam will also operate under these kinds of rules too. You bring your calculator, you bring your pen. I'll provide you with a couple of notes, but that's going to be mostly out of your head instead of having other resources available to you. If you start having problems, come to office hours. Don't wait until the last minute. I can tell you that every single term, I will see a student who is having absolute trouble in week 8 to ask me things about things that happen in week 2 that they have not understood. And given that they haven't understood that, they haven't understood much else in the course thereafter. So when you start having problems, get to either my office hours, make an appointment, come to office hours, or go see the TA for the course as soon as possible. Do not put it off. Far too often I find students that wait until after the drop date to ask questions about things that happened weeks and weeks before, when there is no time for them to recover their grade, and it's kind of a lost opportunity for them. This is the great be polite statement that we have right here. And again, I have never had a problem with this at PSU. Not at all. Other problems have happened, but just never along this line. But it's a long way of saying that. Here's another statement about Disabilities Resource Center. So some students will have learning disabilities, like me, and I'll usually get a note from the DRC before this happens on what kind of compensations that we should be taking to make it so that they can actually take exams on a more even footing. This is the no cheating statement right here. Basically, it says I'll come after you if I suspect you of cheating through some means. My worst term for this course was when I had 10 students that were suspended in a single course for cheating. And then finally, this one here says stuff happens. In classes this size, I can guarantee you that somebody's father, mother, grandfather, grandmother is going to die. It just happens. And it can be devastating. We can make arrangements about it. In a class this size, somebody is going to have to be in the hospital for an extended period of time. It happens. So if we do have one of these emergencies, we will put together a plan, you and I, in order to make it so that you can get through the course. I've had students actually attending class on webcam from their hospital bed because they didn't want to miss things going on in the class. We will take care of it for you. We'll make a written agreement on how things are work, and we'll follow it, get you through the classes. So this is if something very unusual happens. But if something does happen, please let me know contemporaneously with the problem, not 6 weeks after. If it's 6 weeks after, I can't do anything about it. I've had students try to pull some weird things where I got a doctor's note from 2 years before that they assumed would be active now. For whatever reason, I haven't quite figured it out. You'll find an outline for the course up on the wiki in D2L. I didn't think it would matter to duplicate it here. And there'll be a separate video and discussion on what is actually going to be in the course and what those schedules are. And then finally, for the first time, I've decided to put a little changelog together on what's going on in the course. And these are all based upon requests by the class that I had in spring 2015. Basically, they said that they wanted the practice quizzes to come along with a link to the wiki page so that they could get details on them. The class used to have in-class quizzes, which were essentially participation grades. We've gotten rid of those because basically it didn't make very good use of students' time who were actually prepared for class, and they were doing work in the back of the room instead of paying attention to this class. These have been absolutely eliminated. I am fearful, though, that because of this, students who need to go to class won't show up, but that's up to you all. They decided they wanted extra credit, and they decided that providing detailed answers to the practice questions was a good idea, so I've included it there in the syllabus. They also wanted a voting system on wiki pages, and so I've included that functionality in the wiki. Previously, the essential questions were not on a sliding scale. Basically, it was to get a grade higher than a flat C, you needed all 4. But they thought that having the sliding scale would work out to be a little bit better. And now you only need 2 to get a passing grade, which is C- and higher. And the other 3 and 4 levels are for Bs and As. They also decided that a comprehensive final exam was a good idea, providing extra assurance that the person doing the online work was the same one doing things in class. The way of returning the essential questions, I used to return them in class, was changed because it was not FERPA compliant. This is because understanding of the law changes from time to time, and there was a case elsewhere in the country where returning it with the method I did on the folders was deemed to be inappropriate. There used to be some slightly different feedback on the pre-quizzes. You used to have only your total score, not which questions were correct or not. That has been changed. This was asked for. I used to also have some spacing between the pre-quizzes, which was mandatory. That's also been removed. The pre-quizzes are now make a lot of use of random questions, more than was done before. So this means that there are likely to be very different quizzes from the time you take it or not. But again, very similar levels of difficulty, very similar levels of style, so much so that you should read very carefully to make sure that you are actually looking at the same question rather than a different one. So please be careful about this. And then finally, the post quizzes have been changed to their more open response questions, so they're very similar to the final exam. So if you have any questions about this, please go ahead and write the question up in the forum, and I will explain it in great detail, and other students can help me out at the same time. Looking forward to seeing you in the first week of class.